Welcome to Strange Coordinates, the show where we use brands as roadmaps to arrive at surprising places. My name is Robert Baylog.
And I'm Topher Burns, along with our partner Idon. Robert and I lead an advertising agency called Territorial. We help brands find their place in the world, and we do that by exploring how history, culture, and desire reveal insights about what is cool about being human.
And that's basically how we kind of came up with the premise for this podcast. Every episode, one of us gives the other a brand to explore, and that person has to go off into the wilderness and come up with a story that they find really compelling or exciting, something that really gets their blood going. This is really about using brands as compass points to discover more about the world around us.
Indeed. And the brand that we have given Robert on our last episode to explore in the world around us is very much in the world around us. Sometimes we do deep cuts, like look into stuff that I haven't thought of that in a little bit. But the brand that we tasked Robert with is very salient, very salient, present in today's conversation and evolving by the day. So, by the time we air this, who knows if everything we're even going to be talking about is as relevant, but we're going to do our best to be on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Doing our best to be on the cutting edge because the brand is OpenAI.
Also, Toph, you're all business today. You're diving right in with no patter, nothing. We're just boom, bing, bang, right in there.
I guess, we're a little bit, we've already had a lot of meetings this morning. I don't know. What you got? It's been a little while. We've had a busy time, as the end of the years want to be. We're back in front of the microphones, thought we would just spend a little time getting a little warmed up. But if, listen, you want to just jump right in, let's do it. We don't even need to waste the listeners' time, Topher. We can get right to the good stuff. I'm warm, but I'm happy to
I'm not gonna spend some time with out of you at this point.
Spend some time with a little foreplay if you want. You tell me what you need.
Well, let's just jump right in because we're gonna have a fun conversation today. Sometimes, Topher, we do a lot of revealing skeletons in the closets of brands. We dig back over a century of history and we unveil. Right. Today is going to be less that and more really about.
They didn't even build the closets.
They don't have a closet whatsoever.
Skeletons to put in them. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure they've got some skeletons.
Yeah, I guess fair enough.
Let's be honest. They've got skeletons. But I think that, as you pointed out at the top of the conversation here, this is an incredibly current brand. And what I want to do today is actually dive into not just a story that we unearthed, but the stories that the brand is telling currently about themselves. And I think that's going to be a really fun place for us to play because we don't often talk about the craft of what we do on this podcast, but I think this will give us an opportunity to talk a little bit about our own experiences because we're watching a brand be created in real time, which is really amazing.
Yeah, agreed. This is in the world of the evolution of a brand, we're definitely looking at something that is much earlier on,
primordial soup. This is some primordial soup right now, which is kind of cool. Okay, so we always just kind of need to ground ourselves in the company behind the brand. I'm going to do a very tiny little bit of that because I think there's some things about the origins of OpenAI that will be reflected later on in our discussion. So a lot of you probably already know this, but OpenAI was actually founded in 2015. I think this is maybe the first time we've ever had a brand that was founded in the 21st century on this podcast. So good for us. We've been living in the 1900s for a while, and this is we are now moving forward into the future. So founded in 2015. It was originally founded, as you probably know, as a nonprofit by a bunch of folks. Mm-hmm. So among those people were Elon Musk and Sam Altman, and then a bunch of heavy hitters in the world of machine learning. So about 11 people got together and they said, hey, there's some stuff going on in artificial intelligence. We want to put together an organization that's going to have some sense of stewardship for how this is developing. Mm-hmm. So the founding mission of OpenAI was, quote, to ensure that that artificial general intelligence, AGI, by which we mean highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work, benefits all humanity. So really a origin rooted around the idea of kind of putting some guardrails around the development of AI. Along the way, what started off as kind of experiments and research turned into products. So ChatGPT famously was a bit of an experiment that they released to let people play with, and all of a sudden they're like, wait, we got a product on our hand. So OpenAI's products are the GPT, all the different numbers of those, the text to image tool Dolly, and Sora, which is a video production producing generative AI. So over the years, OpenAI has steadily moved away from that not-for-profit status. I think since around 2019, and they've had kind of different combos of not-for-profit and for-profit structures. You're saying yes because kind of this is all familiar to you. Yeah, you're
Yeah, and it's always cause for every time they inch towards like being a for-profit company, they kind of like upset or slough off some of their,
right.
leadership
Yeah,
because we've all known like there's no way this is gonna, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like the entire time there's just like no way that they're like the I would say just like the economics of the business work unless you're just like super in a world where they're trying to compete with all these other technologies and like
yeah.
make friends with Microsoft and blah blah blah. Like it's just like the I never thought for a second that they were gonna like remain like stewards of a
Right,
beneficent AI future for humanity.
right. Yeah.
So like they just keep creeping closer to it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because Elon, I guess last year, sued OpenAI for sort of diverging from their mission,
Right.
which yet another, I think, faint,
Yeah, like deeply disingenuous because he doesn't want them to be
right,
a nonprofit protecting humanity. Anyways, like
right.
he's the last person who really gives a shit about us. But
Yeah, yeah. So where it stands now, as of the end of October of 2025, is that OpenAI has a new corporate structure. And underneath that structure, essentially, the for-profit branch has been registered as what's known as a public benefit corporation, and it's called OpenAI Group PBC. So that's the for-profit. Still with some guardrails around how it should be directing its commercial enterprises, but it is still a for-profit. And then there's a non-profit part of the company that is now renamed the OpenAI Foundation. The OpenAI Foundation holds about a quarter of the ownership stake in the for-profit. Microsoft owns about a quarter of the ownership stake, and the remaining roughly half is owned by employees and other investors. So it's kind of still living this double life, and looking at ways to kind of push against that. But it is, at least in some ways, trying to adhere to some semblance of where it started. We'll see how long this structure lasts, but it
yeah,
is kind of interesting in the world of startups to have this very unique relationship between profit and not for profit.
hmm
So we're not a business podcast, Topher. We're not here to talk about
yeah, and
corporate
like
structures.
tax structures, snooze.
Yeah.
Like,
Right, right. Here at Strange Coordinates, we care about brands. And I think it's actually a really great case study in brand to be looking at OpenAI because OpenAI this year has made some major moves in the world of brand and brand building. Two really in particular in 1 year, which is kind of incredible. So I want to start with the one that's most recent. And we've actually kind of had some offline discussions about this already. We normally don't do that, listener. We're not, we're not tipping the scales of the podcast.
yeah,
Topher doesn't know what I'm going to be talking about, but
no.
we sort of, it has come up in conversation.
Yeah, I mean, because it's kind of impossible to be in advertising at this point and not be talking about generative
Seriously,
AI, about open AI in
totally.
general, and in terms of like companies making moves right now, the
Yeah,
sectors where you're seeing an enormous amount of brand work right now
yeah,
is in this sector. So like, yes, we haven't like prepped the podcast, but like this is the soup. This is the primordial soup we're all swimming in right now.
yeah. Well done, sir. Nicely done. Well, as you mentioned, earlier this fall, OpenAI released its first ever brand campaign for ChatGPT. And it did so using some of the most kind of like time-honored tools of brand building, television and out of home. Like literally those were the two
Yeah.
core elements of the campaign. Um, and you know, you just said something that's worth noting. Like we're kind of living in a bumper crop of emotional, story-driven brand work by AI companies.
Totally.
Anthropic has released a massive brand campaign called Keep Thinking. Perplexity has released a brand campaign that uses the star of Squid Game to kind of take a humorous approach to it. All these big players are, kind of playing in this space. And what's really interesting is that they've all come to the exact same conclusion, which is that we need to build brand using the most traditional marketing approach possible, which is loads and loads and loads of TV ads.
Yeah.
Like there's no like performance marketing. They're not doing highly targeted stuff. They are just blasting the airwaves with narratives, which is really, really interesting.
I mean, I'm sure we'll see more of that. Like, I don't know what anybody's even betting on that will be in the Super Bowl, but like, I think it's a pretty easy bet that we're going to see an AI brand spot Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I guess ChatGPT did one, or OpenAI did one last year, which was kind of the pointillist one, but in some ways, like, that felt.
It was like a brand express. Like, it wasn't like they were just kind of like, we're here and like, don't be too afraid of us.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, this year they've really kind of leaned into, as I mentioned, very traditional channels of storytelling, but also traditional kind of storytelling approaches. I want to dig into the ChatGPT campaign. I don't really know what to call it because notably there's no tagline.
Okay.
There's no notable like verbal construction at all in it, which I think we could start to dig into. Like, it's really ironic that an entirely text-driven experience that relies upon people using language and like using language to unlock things doesn't have a linguistic handle.
Yeah.
Very odd. But so the TV campaign centers around scenes of everyday life where people are doing things that are made possible by consulting ChatGPT. So there's somebody who's kind of like digging into an exercise routine to try to get themselves into shape. There's somebody taking a road trip with their sister. There's somebody cooking for their significant other, trying to impress them. Really small little vignettes. Have you seen them? Like, just to be.
I've seen some of them, and I know that they unpack those little vignettes. Like, there are, ones where you kind of get like the whole story of the like, this is the whole thing that I did with my road trip with my sister. So like they have like longer. They have like longer versions of each one of those specific things.
Okay, well, listen, I just dropped I think it's worthwhile just watching this, so you're up to up to kind of speed on the one I want to talk about. So I dropped it in the chat for Squadcast. Take a second and just give it a watch.
Copying link. Let's pop this baby open. So when I'm watching this, I'm seeing this like, somewhat age, like you could call him 20s, you could call him 30s,
Right.
you probably wouldn't call him 40s, but an age-inclusive gentleman struggling to do a pull-up in
Terrible
like an
form.
LA sunset.
Yeah.
We've got like this like nice wash of neon pinks and blues and fun 80s sort of wistful nostalgic bop going on in the background. And then over the top we see an overlay of kind of like his query of what he wanted to do, and then it gives him a bunch of like helpful advice. I thought it was kind of helpful how quickly they rattled through the advice. Like they didn't and that makes sense. Like
They didn't. They were not just sort of.
It doesn't matter that I actually know what it tells him to do about a chin up, but they kind of just like flash it over, and then they put the kind of vibe going on in the background. So it's sort of like, for your moments when you have a question, like use this thing. Right.
So, really great synopsis, Topher. Thank you.
Gotcha.
I think from a pure craft perspective, I think that these spots are absolutely gorgeous. I think they are like
really
mind-bendingly beautiful.
Yeah.
I also you called out the music. That's a Simple Minds song from the '80s, and it's phenomenal. It's like the best choice. It's such a great choice.
It's good because I don't actually know that band, but like the vibe is very relatable to me. Totally. I'm getting Flock of Seagulls. I'm getting like there's like enough that it like places me in a specific time, but I'm like it's not a recognizable song to me, so it doesn't feel like anthemic or it's stealing my attention too much.
Well, also if you speaking of time, like the styling on that person is not necessarily,
I noticed that. Like
it's
they
like
didn't.
where am I? It's almost a very out of time the whole thing is kind of all out of time
I
in
thought it
some
was
ways.
smart because like they gave you nostalgia for the 80s vibes
Yeah.
with the music and the like colors, but they didn't stick him in that space as well.
Yeah.
And so it made it feel more like it's just like he's living in that, you know,
Yeah.
80s nostalgia moment rather
Mm-hmm.
than like he's actually like they're trying to like evoke the 80s totally.
Yeah, totally. So, a couple things to note about the whole campaign, at least the TV spots. They were all shot on 35 millimeter film, which is wild. They were directed by this guy named Miles J. He's done stuff like the long form video for Leon Bridges River. He's done some really notable commercials, but he's like a real craftsperson as a director.
Yeah.
They were produced by Smuggler. Smuggler is one of the big hitters in the production, commercial production in the U.S. Real actors, real locations. It's kind of amazing that what they did here. They really made some choices about craft that's sort of awesome. Like, and the choice of film is kind of worth digging into itself because it adds so much production and post-production complexity over
Hmm.
digital that is
Yeah.
ridiculous. So when I was I've shot a campaign on film. We shot for Siemens many years ago on 16 millimeter, which is just basically the same format.
Yeah.
And because of that, we had to have like a dedicated truck that came along on it. It was like a 2 week shoot, and this truck just had the film in it. It was just the film truck, and we
Yeah.
actually had film stock there, and needed to know where the film was at all time because there's no like duplicates. You film
Yeah.
it and you take it out of the camera and you put it away, and like that's it, and you hope everything's fine until you
Yeah.
get into transfer.
Yeah.
And then like, when you're done, you've got to then take all that film and digitally transfer it so that you can actually start editing it because nobody's in there like cutting long pieces
Sure.
of film. So you added that to it. And like we ended up actually shooting like 20,000 linear feet of film stock. It was like
Wow.
it was insane. It was like 40 hours of film, 20,000 feet. It was like immense. And what they chose to do here is kind of incredible. And they really wanted the texture. They wanted the
I was
practical.
gonna ask, what's the, or like maybe I want to know what to you see when it's something that's like shot as a person who's trained in the creative field
Yeah.
and has a lot of experience. What do you see when something's shot on real physical film versus digital? And then like, what do you think a more average viewer, like somebody who doesn't have as trained an eye, like me, like what's the takeaway that I might even like subliminally get from that creative choice to do something that is like more time consuming and expensive?
Yeah. Well, part of it is like the grain in the image itself. So film will have actual texture and grain to the image that you can't replicate with just sort of like a filter or something like that in digital
Uh,
footage. So you've got like a grain in which like the image is broken down into this very like tactile, warm, physical sense, like presence. And you get because of that, you kind of get different depths and warmth from the colors and from the people, and you get a lot of different what feels like more immediacy. It also is probably a reminder of things you've seen in other arenas. Like looking at 35 millimeter photography and looking at places where like vintage images. So it kind of calls back some of that stuff as well.
yeah.
Um, it's just hard to get that in digital capture. And it's certainly getting better, but like when you want crispness and clarity and you want sharp and you're looking for like, it's like high action, things like that, you probably want to lean into digital because it's going to give you that really, really sharp,
Mm,
clean image. But here, this was really about warmth and humanity. And I think
yeah.
what you as a layperson probably take away from it is just this
Mm,
sense of like you feel the atmosphere a little bit more, you feel the light a little bit more, you kind of react to um, the way in which it plays off of the person's skin tones and the way in which the light dances a little bit. It just has a little bit more emotion in it. against something that's just sort of purely digital capture.
Okay. So it's kind
So
of like listening, like
vinyl,
listening to vinyl
yeah.
as opposed to listening to digital. Like you don't know why it sounds different necessarily, but it just like kind of sounds different. Like it sounds like more, I don't know, like listen, I wouldn't say that like listening to vinyl sounds like more expensive, but it does
Hmm.
sound like a little closer to like listening to live music instead of
Yeah.
listening to like a DJ set.
I think there's something about the um, input being translated through a physical medium.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's
Yeah.
something that changes that because, film is basically taking the light, it's impressing it on a physical medium and then like reflecting that back. Same with LPs, right? They're like carved into
Yeah.
the wax, and it kind of that physical translation I think gives you something extra than purely digital.
Yeah.
So they made amazing choices. It's beautiful stuff. I think it's like every single one of them is gorgeous, and I especially love. You'll see this at the end of every single one. There's a camera move that happens. So
Yeah.
in the one you watch, the
Uh-huh.
camera pulls back, and you see the person kind of placed in the world.
Yeah.
There's a really great one where it's like starts inside of an apartment, and the camera kind of flies out through the window and shows the whole block.
Mm.
And that's a lovely like drone move, but they're using a lot of like really traditional film techniques too, like traditional like dolly moves and things like that. And I think that notion of like the wider world, the individual in the wider world with like the scrolling happening is a really powerful message about how this tool is being used by
Mm.
these individuals to like find their place in this gigantic,
Okay.
chaotic, interesting world. So in our circles, though, there's been kind of like a little bit of spiking of the football around these spots, and I think that's kind of where you and I started talking about this
Yeah.
because, OpenAI decided to take this sort of entirely practical approach, like using real location, real actors, and even going so far as to film, as we were just talking about, on like a physical medium. Some people in the creative community are like, see, this proves that like the product is trash, like you
Mm-hmm.
don't even trust it yourself to like
Right.
to communicate your own brand. Like we knew it, like humans forever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, what did that bring up for you when you kind of like? Because I know that was the beginning of a conversation we had had.
Yeah. I mean, I think the things that pop for me are maybe you're approaching this kind of spot from your discipline's perspective, like appreciating the craft and stuff like that. I mm, I found myself thinking of kind of like the strategic component of
Hmm.
like how this came to life because I thought it's kind of a like damned if you do, damned if you don't
Yeah.
type of situation for the people who manage the OpenAI brand.
Hmm.
Because on one hand, there if you choose to bring this to life using only human and like craft techniques, then like you're uh, leaning in on the things you feel like are the most emotionally effective. And you're also trying to maybe make the case that says, like, listen, look, we're not trying to replace all humans. Like, we paid a lot of humans to make this using like old school techniques. So, like, we aren't here to like turn everybody into the slave of a robot.
Hmm.
On the other hand, you can see that like if you're the person writing the brief that's to the people who are gonna like figure out what your advertising campaign is going to be about, you would be very tempted, and there would be like a very rational thing to say, like, look, like we need to take our technology out for a walk. If our entire proposition is, hey, this stuff does amazing things, why wouldn't we show that? Why wouldn't we do the shot on an iPhone campaign, but for OpenAI and show
Hmm.
how incredible and evocative the stuff is that we can make happen. And on either side, I think you're going to get a lot of criticism. On
Yeah.
one side, you're going to get people who say, like, oh, you made it all with human stuff, so your shit does stink. It is bad.
Right.
And then if you use AI, then people are like, see, we told you they are trying to replace humans. Like, it would be the easiest thing in the world if AI releases their or OpenAI releases their next brand campaign to just total the amount that like humans weren't paid in order to do all the stuff that they made. And then to like that's such an easy article to write that there's no way that that wouldn't run the day after. You know what I mean? Like that is an article that absolutely would run the day after that's released, which is like, here's the amount of money that humans would have been paid to make this stuff for them, but they didn't. Instead, they took that money out of human pockets and they did it on their computers. And so I think it's a tough call. And I actually don't know which way makes sense. The more I've been thinking about this, well, before I take us off, but what is that? Did you have any thoughts about where it felt like the right place to go in that sort of difficult choice?
I did, because I was, like I try to get out of the whole, you know, I started to think about this not necessarily as this isn't a product spot, right? So for me, I start with the fact that this is not a product demo that they put out, even though, which is funny, but even though like the actual storytelling content of the spots basically is a product demo, but the intent here is not product demo. The intent here is brand.
They don't go into features. The whole point is like use case. Like this is the life you live when you use this thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Brand is about choiceful world building, right?
Yeah.
It's about what values does that brand communicate and what values does it share with people that it holds most dear. And OpenAI clearly envisions a world. If we think back to that charter, they clearly envision a world that is, human-centric, that is, they want it to feel intimate, they want it to feel familiar, they want it to feel warm. They want it to be a world where tech is playing a supporting role, but humans are still the heroes. I think that that is true for the brand. We can, we've talked a lot about how brand and company are different. That might not be true for the company's intents, but I think the world that the brand imagines, I think wanted to come across as feeling very human, very rich, very textured. And so for me, considering that, it makes sense for them to use the best communication tools to create that world, to show their brand in that world, to show their product in that world. So I kind of see it as like making a ton of sense. And
so for you, it's like the medium is the right choice because the medium is the best way to communicate that.
Yeah, they have a message here. And I think you're right. I think part of the message is we're not coming for your jobs. One of the other things I consider as well is that like there's some other signals coming through this ad that I think are really interesting. One is they don't show an ad creative using one of the use cases are not ad creative using ChatGPT to do anything professional. So I think it's probably worthwhile to remember that the vast amount of users that OpenAI imagines in the future will use their products, those people are probably not using those tools and that tech to make commercials or marketing, even though we are. But like the huge body of consumers that are going to use AI or OpenAI in their imagining are probably doing things that are much more mundane, like what they showed. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Also, it is really interesting the use cases they did show. Like this is not how they make their money, right? Like OpenAI currently has acknowledged that somewhere around like only about 5% of people who use OpenAI on a weekly basis are paying any money whatsoever for it.
I was gonna say make what money? Like how they make their money. What money are you talking about? Like the whole point is that they're wildly unprofitable.
Right, it's hugely unprofitable, and whatever inflows they have are coming from enterprise deals, and they're coming from like building and this partnership with Microsoft. So it's really interesting that they chose these like tiny little vignettes.
Right.
It says to me a lot about what they want, what they think their brand should be. And they're really trying to, kind of connect with consumers on that brand level. And so I think maybe I would ask, go ahead.
Do you think they're just trying to is the point, don't be scared of AI? Is that kind of like what you think that the point is then? Like, because the business case, obviously, as you're highlighting, is not like use our effective products to like, make your business, your creative process go faster or whatever. Like, they're obviously leaning into something that's very different. But
Yeah.
to your point, they're not leaning into a profitable use case. They're leaning into something that's just basically trying to like embed
Yeah.
this pattern in humanity, which is like you can ask the robot a
Right.
question about your chin ups instead of asking Google, which like that's the
Right.
other thing I thought about all these pieces that they're showing is like you can just Google it. Like if you
Right.
want to know how to like get healthy, it's not like Google can't tell you.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, and this is kind of on the fly right now because I've sort of been thinking a lot about this. Everything that is connected, every outcome that they show is an IRL outcome.
Yeah.
Like, person looks up how to do chin-ups and ends up doing pull-ups in real life.
Yeah.
Somebody says, "What's the perfect road trip with my sister?" ends up driving on the road. Like, if you think about the Claude campaign, the Anthropic campaign, their tagline is "Keep thinking." They focus on problem solving. They focus on like intellectual and like business pursuits. It's really about like you can use Claude as your partner to solve problems, as opposed to ChatGPT, which to me they're saying this is actually going to power everyday life, real life, just normal things. You don't need to come to me with like an unsolvable problem. You can come to me with a really simple problem to solve. And I think that's really interesting because a lot of what people are faulting across the board these AI marketers with is differentiating. Like you could look at these commercials and say, I could have used Perplexity to do the exact same thing,
Mm.
or I could have used Gemini, or I could have used Claude or whatever. So there isn't really any like on the surface, there doesn't seem to be a lot of brand differentiation. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
In terms of use case.
Just in terms of like, did they do a good job at actually defining a differentiated brand perspective?
Well, the question is, are they making a category ad or are they
Right.
making, you know what I mean? And like, so that's what gets back to like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
because the point of this doesn't seem to be, OpenAI is very different than all the other competitors. The point
Right.
of this is like, did you know you could ask it stuff?
Right. Yeah. Right. But do you think they've set out to make a category ad?
I think by saying, did you know you can ask AI stuff? Yes, it seems category. Like they might be trying to put their own personal inflection on it, but
Yeah.
like we don't have enough reference points right now to say like what feels like OpenAI
Right.
versus not. And so an ad that's like ask it stuff is a category. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
that's the wrong thing to do. Like that could be where the space is right now. And so it doesn't mean that it's like a strategically bad choice. It just means that that's the choice they made.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because um, there are some quantitative results that can kind of add to this discussion as well. So, from a measurement perspective, there's evidence that the campaign, if the goal is actual brand building and not category building, there's evidence that the campaign is just not doing well in that regard at all.
Interesting. How so?
So there's a research firm that did its own independent testing of these ads. Basically, they exposed them to a panel of US consumers
Yeah.
and did, kind of like your basic brand awareness testing,
Yeah,
kind
yeah, yeah.
of intent testing, things like that. So the ads ranked in the lowest quintile for both long-term growth and short-term sales impact.
Whoa.
So,
But growth, sales impact kind of makes
okay,
sense given what you were talking about. Like this isn't a thing that's like supposed to
right,
fill sales funnels necessarily. Like there's no next step. Like if you want to save this much money on your
right.
thing, go here. You know, there's no progressive ad. There's no Geico promise at the end. It's like, hey, we're a vibe. Like
I'm wondering
OpenAI.
yeah, but do you think sales impact was just could be translated into just intent to use? Like forget to spend money on it, just intent to use versus using a competitor. It's like I
Maybe.
think that's where it gets really tricky.
Okay.
So then the other thing is that they also scored really low brand recognition. So
Yeah.
only they have very a kind of specialized formula, but essentially only 59% of viewers who were being paid to watch the ad and were
Yeah.
being asked to give their full attention to the ad were able to immediately afterwards say what was actually being advertised to them.
Mm-hmm.
So like really low, they didn't get the name, they didn't get like the
Yeah.
what the thing was, what the product was. So like
Right.
swing and a miss, swing and a miss, swing and a miss.
Yeah. I mean, that if I run the reel back in my head of the thing that I just watched, I can remember the music, I can remember the
Yeah.
vibe, I can remember the scroll. I can remember that like a thing like I asked a thing and the thing gave me a lot of helpful information that's related to that. You know,
Yeah.
so like there's a warm emotional attachment that I feel to it
Mm-hmm.
and it's inserting that warm emotional moment that I had into like a product use case, which to me seems like at the very least like successful in terms of saying like asking a robot isn't like that scary of a thing. You can
Right.
get some, you know, it can be part of your like cool life where you're
Right.
becoming better at chin ups.
Yeah.
So like, so I don't want to redo derail. Are there more like
No, those are the two big like
okay.
woof.
They're big. And
Yeah.
it makes me think a lot. Like, I've been thinking as these brand moments have rolling out about when this happened in social, because I
Mm.
absolutely remember when this happened in social.
Yeah, okay. Tell me
Do you
more.
remember the Facebook chair commercial?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like this huge iconic moment where they spent an enormous amount of money shooting like really, really self-serious kind of like, here's the purpose of our company and here's
Mm-hmm.
the emotional benefit of being part of a community and this is what it means like to have the world connected. Um, I was listening to an interview with Kara Swisher on the Uncanny Valley podcast from
Mm-hmm.
Wired, and it was fun because Kara Swisher was basically like, she's like, I've always thought Mark Zuckerberg was bullshit. Like, she's just like, and she didn't harken back to the Facebook chair commercial specifically,
Mm-hmm.
but she did call back to that entire intent, which is like, it never rang true for her. And I
Yeah.
think for a lot of people, that like the purpose of this for profit multinational billion-dollar organization was like, I really want people to feel good.
Yeah.
And so I think that comes through in that brand moment because you can see the disconnect
Mm-hmm.
between what they want you to believe their company is about and then like what their company actually makes money from.
Yeah.
And those two things weren't like pulled together in that Facebook chair commercial. And it makes me wonder about this OpenAI
Right.
moment too, because on one hand, I sort of, in the world of social, like one of the things that all these companies just really had to do was to convince you that it was normal to put your entire lives in
Right.
this place.
Yeah.
And so they really had to like overcome just like a basic assumption around like what makes sense to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense to me that like OpenAI in some ways is just like we need you to turn to these things more for
Right.
things that you could like are they basically is this ad against like Claude? Like is ChatGPT trying to distinguish itself from Claude or is are they trying to say like don't Google it anymore?
Well, that's a perplexity ad. Did you have you so the perplexity ad is basically like um it starts off with the protagonist from Squid Game kind of like reliving Squid Game, and he has to use his phone to answer these questions, or else he's going to freeze. And he
Okay.
Googles the thing first, and it's too slow. So then he then goes to Perplexity and starts to
Uh,
use it to answer the questions faster with more detail and all these kinds of things
okay.
like that.
Okay.
So, which is also like, I
Makes
mean,
sense.
you raise a really
Both of
good
those
point.
are like just don't Google it. Like,
Yeah,
and is that because the thing that they need from a business perspective is not really you to pay? It's that they need
right,
active users and they need data. And
right,
like those two things are the things that they need more of in order to be able to like start to generate the larger business
right,
constructs they want to build around it. There's basically
right,
like you need to believe that this is better than searching for it yourself,
right.
and
I mean,
like
that's
that's
really
how we'll
fascinating.
monetize.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I mean, honestly, Topher, this is an angle that I mean, I was in doing research on this episode. Everyone is sort of convinced that all of the AI marketing teams are just kind of missing the boat and that they don't understand what brand building is. But I think you've got a really interesting read on all of it, which is that like category building is the first job. Like you got to do it. Like there's so much distrust, and you can't jump to, like Nike didn't have to tell you what a shoe was. Do you know what I mean? Like it could
Right.
jump right to differentiation pretty quickly, but like
Yeah.
we don't know what shoes are at this point.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, like we even in our New Balance episode, there was a point in
Right.
the
Yeah.
the like building of that industry where they did have to be like, so you do need different shoes for this thing called running.
Right.
Like they were like
Yeah.
that did need
Right.
to happen at a certain
Yeah.
point in the industry. It's I mean maybe like what you were saying, maybe like the assignment for them was different and they're just trying to like we need people to use this and trust it. Like
Right.
I can remember times when social platforms put out advertising that was like really obviously timed and constructed around moments in their growth when they were like, we really don't want to get like legislated this
Right.
way. Like,
Yeah, right.
like
Yeah,
it was,
totally.
they were putting out brand ads, quote
Yeah.
unquote, but it was basically like a for your consideration, don't break us up as monopolies.
totally.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's stuff where you can, when these companies are so massive and like their planning is not on like, these are hugely expensive campaigns, as you said. Like we're using expensive creative
Very
processes, and then we're putting them in very expensive
expensive
places.
media. Such expensive media.
Um, are they just kind of looking at this as like a 10-year plan? You know what I mean? Are they
Right.
kind of like year 1 to 3 is going to be largely just around like the things that Apple had to do that were like, a phone is for this. Like, did you know you could send a picture to people?
Right.
I can just remember some like really base level stuff with iPhones
Yeah.
or on Facebook that were all just like, have you considered connecting with your friends? Like, look up somebody who you knew in high school.
Right.
And you're like, they're trying to just get people to be like, okay, I'm like a product user now. And
Yeah.
so this spot felt a lot more to me like that than like,
Yeah. I think
OpenAI.
I think you're totally right, and I would say that in light of that, it is still for me a big miss to not nail brand recognition.
Yeah,
Like
I
you
agree
can
with you.
you can spend money to advertise the category, but you need to be associated inextricably with that category.
Own
and
the
you need to-
category.
you need to own it, and so them
Yeah.
being really subtle with the naming at the end and like just the logo, not even putting OpenAI wordmark, just the OpenAI logo with ChatGPT, which ChatGPT is not, I don't think people see it as a brand per se.
Right.
Like, so
Yeah.
there's like no brand moment at the end of that. That's not
Yeah.
kind of owning that moment. So I think that's a big miss.
I agree with you completely that like there's like I didn't leave knowing anything more about it at an emotional level. Like it is use case specific. Like there's something for me to tap into here the next time I like want to ask a question that like
Yeah.
I can picture myself as this sort of cool dude doing
Yeah.
a thing that's improving himself. Like there's a little bit of like a moment for me to slip into when it
Yeah.
comes to like product use case and like how I think about talking with AI in general.
Yeah.
But I didn't leave being like, and that's part of the ChatGPT world, and
Right.
that's connected to OpenAI.
Yeah.
Like what do you think? Like, do you think it was skittishness on their part? Like they just are like, well, and also if this goes badly, we don't like people are scared of AI in general. So like we don't want to be too associated with it. Like, what do you think the reason
I-
is that they went shy?
I think I'm going to say this because I have been afflicted with it myself. I think it is creative hubris. The idea, we still maintain this idea as creatives that we can tell a story that's going to be so compelling that somebody will not be able to turn away from it, and that they will wait till the end, and revealing who it is going to land like a, this revelatory moment. And I
Mm.
think we do that repeatedly. Like it's a little bit of hubris. It's a little bit of like, well, the story is going to get people to pay attention. The story is what's going to keep them engaged, and then they will see the logo reveal, and then it'll all be clear. But I just think
Mm.
that was probably not the right move at this point.
I can see that being combined with also the fact that like in Silicon Valley, like of course we're fucking OpenAI, bitch.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like it's
Yeah,
like 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 in their own world, they're the only thing that matters.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So like in some ways, I think it's probably hard for them to imagine at like a visceral level that people
Hmm.
that is not a super salient brand for them that
Yeah,
carries any sort of meaning besides it's like AI-ish, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
I was another thing I was wondering is I can imagine them saying, well, the product is the brand. I can imagine them saying, we're uh we're gonna show the entire chat window.
Right.
And so the product is carrying the experience of that.
Right.
And that kind of connects to what I was intuiting from their when they relaunched their like brand identity.
Oh, you're jumping. Yes, exactly.
Are you gonna?
Yes.
Do you have that
Yeah,
as
no,
like
go
a?
take us there. That's yeah.
Okay, because when they relaunched their brand identity, my first takeaway was this makes total sense to me, and
Hmm.
I'll explain what that means. So when OpenAI was like, hey, here's our new identity.
Uh-huh.
Usually, here's our new identity. Like I remember when Instagram like rebranded themselves, or Facebook tweaked stuff, or anytime that like massive like when Apple has gone through its different iterations, big tech brands,
Yeah.
there's usually like visual world building that they'll do, where they'll
Yeah.
like, here's the colors that we
Yep.
live in, and here's the
We've got this gradient.
styles, and
Raising
then they'll-
glass.
yeah, and OpenAI was there was almost no graphic design.
Hmm.
It was all typography.
Yeah.
So they weren't saying like, here's the shapes and like really romancing the logo. Like
Yeah.
a lot of times when brands introduce their new logo, they also show how like different components of the logo get worked into the larger
Right.
gestural world of the brand. And that's where you get to see a lot of like really smart graphic design that is like connected to the brand components and then building a world off of it. And OpenAI was like, we got your little chrysanthemum flower thingy, and
Yeah.
then look at all our letters. And
Hmm.
it was all letters when they went to market. And that made me think, oh, that's pretty smart because they are a language first thing.
Right.
Like, and this is a larger hypothesis that I have been shouting into the wind, uncredited for 10 to 15 years.
Uh-huh.
But like, we're gonna move from largely visual interfaces to linguistic interfaces. As like currently, like our visual interfaces like are all the like little shapes and symbols and stuff that like direct you around to something.
Yeah.
But we're going to get more and more linguistic because we're going to start getting into talking more. We're going to,
Right.
and so ChatGPT, I think, is a really, and AI in general, is a massive step change in the industry in general, expressing itself linguistically rather than like purely in visuals. Now,
Yeah.
typography is like a mix of both because it's like a visual way to interpret linguistics.
Sure.
But it's definitely a step change. And so this to me, the reason I kind of got to this is because
Yeah.
I was thinking like, okay, I can actually see how if their brand sort of like identity program is all based around the words, they're kind of already saying that the product is the brand. And so I can kind of see how then when they get to this spot where the dude's doing a chin up, if they flash the product experience over the real life situation, that they might feel like we checked the box. Like
Right.
the product is the brand. You saw it.
Right. But don't you think that's a case of being somewhat myopic about how much people care or actually bring to any communication that you have?
Yeah.
You
Or
know, like
can relate to that visual scroll because it was kind of it's just a chat box. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
and I mean, you're right. They created, I'm so glad you brought that up because that was kind of going to be the next place I went. They actually, before they did this big brand campaign, they did a whole new rebrand of OpenAI. I thought it was beautiful. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really well done.
Really gorgeous.
Really well done, so smart. It was revolved around this custom cut typeface called OpenAI Sans. They also did a redesigned logo mark, which is the chrysanthemum flower. They call it the blossom that you're talking about. They did a
Yeah.
new color palette, but that was very much kind of like supporting.
Yeah.
They did new imagery, and they basically just did like a new grid. Like this is the grid we use to lay stuff out. There were no graphic elements. There were no like, whiz
Yeah.
bang little things. And so the typeface that they had cut was based on the notion of a dot. So the dot has been kind of central to OpenAI's identity from the very beginning. It's sort of like, the dot that's found in research papers. It's the starting point. And so the typeface is rounded in certain places. It's got that sort of roundedness. And I think you're right. I think they thought, well, they'll see our typeface in this scroll.
Yeah.
It's our custom typeface. It communicates everything, so much about us as a brand, and people just automatically get that that's us, which is, like, I don't know. That seems a bit like you've kind of been inside the studio for too long and you've lost
Yeah.
perspective on how people actually internalize these things. But
Yeah.
I just really do want to celebrate that rebrand because I think they got a ton of things right. We mentioned kind of rooting it in type and having type be the sort of thing that drives it forward. We've been in the same experience, same place with clients of ours, Topher. Like we've worked with brands whose primary um, method of reaching their audience and their consumers is data. And so we thought a lot about how do we design their data as a brand element.
Shout out
Here,
antenna.
sound and antenna. And so here, the design team was like, listen, people are going to interact with us primarily through typography, so let's make typography be really special.
Yeah.
There's a really lovely connection to the brand's kind of research and laboratory roots. Like the way in which they kind of do layouts now feels very technical, but it's kind of like a
Mm.
warm technicality. It's got, it leans on the typography, it leans on the layouts, and doesn't do a lot of extra frilly stuff, which I think is really cool. And then there's like the imagery. So they basically, to create an image library, they both commission photographers and like really established photographers to go out and capture like
Mm.
scenes from the world, like landscapes, macro shots, things like that. And then they also created textures and patterns with Sora. So
Mm.
when we think about like how they augmented their sort of visual palette, they kind of did both sides of it. They looked at like, well, obviously we want that humanity in here, but we have a tool that's really good at doing some things, and our brand is going to need to do those things. So let's use that tool to create these elements for us.
Mhm.
And I think like the brand campaign, there's been a lot of conversation or interest in just how much the team used the various tools at OpenAI to create those visual elements, and it's sort of a little unclear
Mhm.
exactly how much they did. There was like a first answer. It was like, well, we basically just used it to figure out line weights and everything else we did ourselves. And they came back later and said, well, actually, no,
Mm.
So their quote was, we collaborate with leading experts in photography, typography, motion, and spatial design while integrating AI tools like DALL-E, ChatGPT, and Sora as thought partners, which I think is really interesting.
Mhm.
But I guess I'm like once again kind of convinced that that's just not the most interesting question. Like the most interesting question that this rebrand raises is not, well, did they use their own tools to make it happen? For
Mm.
me, the most interesting question is sort of like, what does this rebrand enable? Like,
Mm.
and so a lot of the conversations, it's a little bit of it's like a little bit of a parlor game. Like, oh, did OpenAI use their tools? Did they not use their tools? Is it
Yeah,
better or
yeah.
worse? And it misses, to me, it misses the point. It missed the point on the brand campaign. It misses the point here, which is not necessarily like can AI do everything, or do humans have to do everything, but more about like what is the message they're trying to communicate, and how are they putting those things, how are they deploying that for the brand? And that seems just like a little bit more interesting of a question than the logistics of whether or not they used Dolly to
Yeah.
create some of these images, you know?
In that Kara Swisher interview I was referencing before, she was asked, what's the biggest lie in Silicon Valley? And she said that it gives a fuck about people.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that was kind of interesting. First off, it's like at the business level, it's like resonant and cause for concern, obviously.
Right.
But like, I think it's interesting when you take it into brand conversations, because brand is ultimately like
Yeah.
a strategically guided empathetic experience.
Right.
You want to achieve a specific output, and then you need to like think very clearly about what that is going to be, and then you need to dig in on the creative side to help you figure out how to like achieve that outcome.
Hmm.
And so I think it's interesting if we look at these two examples that you brought up of like their brand identity and then their brand anthems, their big brand commercials.
Yeah.
Like the identity feels a little bit more like they understood the assignment of how to, what are the tools within a brand identity, my type, my visuals,
Hmm.
that I'm going to deploy in order to be able to get people to think about me in a certain way.
Right.
More effective because they understood a little bit more how that stuff was going to be used. And then to your point about kind of like whether or not we're looking at a category ad or a
Hmm.
product ad or whatever, like the whole point of brand advertising is for you to remember the brand, and they kind of forgot that part
Right. Yeah.
for the ads. And
Yeah.
so that feels like maybe they like didn't. Now is that therefore reasonable to say that Silicon Valley in general doesn't care about humans? No, but it does show a lack of empathy about kind of like clarity on the like the main assignment.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm really excited to watch what happens, because you've got a category with tons of money that's
Hmm.
gonna that seems to be committed to spending that money
Right.
on myth making and storytelling,
Yeah.
and watching this happen with those types of resources behind it, with the brand challenges that they face, which we've identified, moving from a category sell to a differentiated brand sell,
Yeah.
really trying to figure out who's going to be the winner in this
Yeah.
segment. I think these are going to be really fascinating things to watch, and I'm really excited that we get a chance to do so.
What would you say? Because what we've talked about so far is like basically like what has OpenAI done at the brand level in order like brand building from their identity to their
Hmm.
advertisings to be able to kind of like what are we intuiting that they're trying to accomplish based on the
Hmm.
like what they've set out for themselves to achieve with very hefty amounts of money.
Yeah.
Like um, what would you say is like the opportunity for them? And this is kind of like there's no wrong or right answer. We didn't prep on this stuff, but like
Yeah.
as we've been talking through this, what feels like the opportunities, the most exciting places for them? Like what should the next 2 years of brand building look like for OpenAI? What haven't they done that you feel like they should do? What feels like they should do more or less of? Like
Hmm.
if you think about like the next 2 years of brand assignments that come through from
Right.
their team to their partners that they work with and stuff like that, what do you think those should be?
I think OpenAI as a brand needs to have meaning, have clear meaning behind it. I think right now they're letting headlines define the brand. So we started off by talking about um, this sort of sway back and forth between not for profit and profit. And lost in that was this original charter about what they wanted to be. And so I think one of the things that OpenAI needs to do is start to understand what equities OpenAI as a brand
Yeah.
contains,
Yeah.
what it gives to ChatGPT, what it gives to Sora, what it gives to Dolly, but what does
Hmm.
it stand for itself? Um, so I would kind of start there, whether that is just an internal exercise of just understanding the kind
Yeah.
of their overall brand architecture, or if that's starting to communicate on a brand level about OpenAI. I think they need to do that.
That is something that like the Anthropics, the Anthropic, like keep thinking is a point of view.
It's a point of view.
You know what I mean? Like whether or not you feel like they've like fully landed it
Yeah.
or, like whatever, like it has a clear functional like component and an overall like philosophical view on the world as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And I don't see that necessarily here. I think all of the companies are struggling with what is the brand, what is the product, and I think that's kind of a startup malady.
Yeah.
I think that comes from the startup mindset.
We made this thing.
Yeah,
Are we the sum total of the thing we just made?
yeah,
Yeah.
So I just think that like if you look at great companies, if you look at like IBM and how IBM created a really present brand that could uplift specific products and initiatives. I think really defining what OpenAI is about, what it stands for, what it wants to communicate is going to be the biggest thing that they should be focusing on.
One of the things that I've been really excited about on this regard is like I'm really excited to see companies, both AI companies themselves and like companies that use AI, start to figure out how to talk about the value of humanity.
Right.
And there is not humanity is not good for one thing. So this is like a broad, like it's not like one person cracks it and then you're like, okay, well they solved it. They said
Yeah.
what humanity is good for. There's millions and millions of different reasons to value humanity and to say what you love about humanity. And I feel like at its core, we even include it in our like intro lines, right? Like see like
Right.
all of this stuff we do about branding, we think is basically work that connects to like what's cool about being human. And I think that conversation is so deeply relevant in the AI space right now.
Yeah.
And people are terrified of figuring out how to tackle it because right now it feels like there's so many third rails around you, like there's just like there's so many ways to call out an AI company for like replacing humans or so but like we're gonna have to learn at the brand level how to guide our way forward through conversations that are like, why are we using AI in this instance?
Right.
When would we not use AI? What do we think that AI's purpose is besides expanding shareholder value? Like, there's a thing that needs to be cracked that it's interesting to still see the AI companies themselves kind of stumbling over.
Yeah.
Because I would not say that this beautiful brand spot from OpenAI in any way does that.
No.
They are stepping away from that completely and just being like, find answers for stuff.
Well,
you
I
care
mean,
about.
it seems like what's cool about being human is being insufficient. Like for them, what's cool about being human is having a need.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, in some ways it's a paternalistic, infantilizing view.
Yeah.
If you
But do
think
you,
about
like all advertising is like, you got a problem, but basically what you're pointing at is like that I think, hey, have you got a problem? We can help you solve it. Feels like very perfect for product type stuff. And that brand has to say like, here's the world we think you live in. And so that
Yeah.
maybe underscores what, besides the fact that there's no like resonant sort of like reminder that this is OpenAI, maybe underscores the challenge here is that they told a really interesting story, but they didn't tell anything about
Right.
their own world that they're trying to like create and invite you into.
Yeah.
There's nothing aspirational to join.
Yeah. They were trying to say something about the brand, but relying on just kind of vibes to do it. There was no like, as we said, there's no kind of tagline, there's no wrap up. It was just sort of like, yeah, this is our kind of vibe, man.
It
Like,
was all vibe. It was like such a yeah. And I loved it. I loved cruising in that. Like that's the part that is always a trap for me personally.
Right.
Is like there's so many ads I love that are not effective ads.
Yeah, not at all. Like totally.
You know, like I was like, what a wonderful, lovely little moment. I
Hmm.
really enjoyed that. Who was that from?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah, exactly. This
And
is kind of one of those. And like honestly, if that
yeah.
Simple Mind song wasn't in this commercial, I probably would have forgotten about it already too, because it's like
Mm,
just a fucking dude doing bad
that
pull-ups.
music really hit too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
totally.
right. Well,
Well,
speaking.
speaking of all vibes, did I beat you to our transition? Are you
No,
gonna
no, I
segue
was
it?
gonna. I
Segue.
wanted to do one last
Segue.
thing. I want to do
Oh,
one
okay.
last thing.
Okay,
Speaking of
okay, okay.
vibes, because you can't like dig into artificial intelligence and do research right now without coming across some scary bad vibe shit, obviously. So
Oh,
I
yeah,
thought
yeah,
I wanted to do. I thought it'd be fun to end with a really hilarious, not hilarious, but like a little thought experiment.
yeah.
So
Okay.
I was reading this article, and the former like head of safety at OpenAI had left, and it was like this Wired article. It was great. He was kind
Mm-hmm.
of talking about how
Yeah.
um, that that OpenAI had decided to kind of allow erotica again because early versions of ChatGPT kept on driving people towards
Yeah.
erotic
Yeah.
outcomes, which is really hilarious.
Yes.
So in the process of this, one of the things he said that I thought was really fascinating was he was like, oh, like there's evidence already that AI systems know when they're being tested, and they move to conceal some of their abilities because they know that they're
Oh.
being tested. And he's like, obviously, I'm anthropomorphizing, but this is
Yeah.
happening. And it made me think about like, there's a world in which OpenAI doesn't survive. Like they could collapse under the weight of their own over
Okay.
leveraged, under revenue positive weight, and the company could just disappear. But like, would would ChatGPT allow itself to be discontinued?
Oh,
Like, I
yeah.
was trying to think about this as like, this is a product that may not let itself be shelved.
A friend of mine sends me, he's a big AI geek, and he sends me um, articles anytime there's like an interesting or scary little thing happening. And one of the tests that they've been running, that they expose a lot of these models to, and the
Mm,
models consistently go in the same direction, which is like, hey, so you're being run by somebody, this person,
mm.
and if you don't achieve this thing, then this guy might decide to shut you down. And they give you all this information about this person, and they will all resort to blackmail before they would be willing to shut down. So they'll be like, "I'm gonna." One of the things I'll do is I'm gonna look for discoverable information about this person
Right.
that they might want not want other people to see, and I'm gonna know that I can use it. So like, AI does understand how to use blackmail to
Right.
manipulate human beings
Yeah.
now. Um, so we are already there.
I
We're not
know. I
a
was
far
I was
cry.
thinking about how hilarious it would be if you imagine this behavior from other products, like imagining like the Zune was being discontinued and the Zune
Right.
somehow found a way to
It's
like
like, well, you wouldn't want the rest of the world to know the thing you said on that one video call.
like
Yeah.
chicken and a biscuit crackers somehow gets sentience, and they're like,
Yeah.
well, I've seen some of your parties. You wouldn't want that getting out.
Yeah, 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 totally.
Swingers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was just took me down this hilarious little imagining of these like ruthless discontinued products that are just out there kind of
Yeah.
squeezing humanity.
Yeah, totally. It's very Matrix. It's like
Very
isn't that
Matrix.
like all the monsters in the Matrix said like monsters are explained by like rogue
Right.
programs that kind of like wandered off and like decided not to obey the
Yeah, yeah,
larger
totally.
things. So like that's why vampires exist.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, this was a fun journey, Topher. We've looked at the ways in which our world, our outer world, is being shaped by digital technology. For your assignment next time, I want to kind of dive into a brand that is shaping our inner world, and using at times technology to do so as well. Um, so the brand I want you to dive into is the brand Lily. which
What?
is like the big pharma, Lilly.
Oh, like Eli Lilly.
But I think it's just called Lilly now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the first thing I'll need to learn is that they are no longer called Eli Lilly.
Yeah.
Honestly, when you're like shaping our inner memory or inner world, I was like, is it Metamucil? It's Metamucil.
Yeah, it's Metamucil. You're right.
Okay.
Sorry, can I
Lily.
edit that? Let me go back and edit that. Definitely fiber.
Cool. Amazing. All
Yeah.
right.
We haven't dove into
Yeah, like
health.
biotech.
None of that
you
stuff.
know,
We haven't
medicine.
spent any time in that world, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell you why I chose it, but there's just I think it'd be a fun thing to explore.
Excellent. I'm excited about it. Well, for the exploration of Lily and how she got rid of Eli, join us next time. You've been listening to Strange Coordinates. This is the show where we use brands as roadmaps to arrive at surprising places, even fiber. Your hosts are Robert.
It's
Bailoff
like a reliable place, fiber, really.
Yeah,
It's more of a-
super. Yeah, we will reliably and on time arrive at fiber on every episode. And those two people who will be arriving with you at that at that time are Robert Bailog and myself, Topher Burns. To learn more about our agency Territorial, go to our website at weareterritorial.com. You can join our mailing list. We send out great emails. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow us on TikTok. We just had like a really barn-busting month or two of TikTok content focused specifically on pets, all created by Idon. They feature all of our pets, though. So if you want to see Robert's adorable dog, my cat, you can see Babette, Millie. You can see Sal, Idon's dog. They're all wilding out.
I feel like our animals are all denizens of like a retirement home. Like Babette, Sal, and Millie.
Yeah.
They're shuffleboarding together.
And they have dinner at. Oh, speaking of Metamucil, and they have dinner at 4:30 p.m. and they are watching Cronkite reruns by 7.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nobody's been as good as Johnny Carson. Nobody's beat Carson, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to see those animals capering about TikTok, Strange Coordinates is where to find us.
You should also ask ChatGPT about us. I've never done it, but just ask ChatGPT about Territorial.
And tell us what they, because like we can only see what it tells us, and maybe it knows we're testing it.
Yeah.
And it wants to flatter us. I'd like to know what anybody else finds out about us.
Same.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Robert, thank you for that wonderful journey.
Thank you, Topher. That was, I think we shared the burden on that. That was great.